In a pivotal week for South Africa's economic and diplomatic landscape, Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana tabled the 2025 budget speech yesterday, marking a third attempt to pass a budget. Well, at the same time, President Cyril Ramaphosa's high-stakes meeting with US President Donald Trump in the Oval Office drew global attention, with Trump's claims of a white genocide in South Africa. The rand, buoyed by a weakening dollar, strengthened to 17 rand 89, reflecting cautious market optimism despite uncertainties around trade relations and fiscal policy. Well, joining me now is Johann Els, Chief Economist at Old Mutual. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us.
Afternoon.
What has the general reaction been to Budget 3.0? You've said it's more market-friendly and at the optimistic end of market expectations.
Absolutely. And I think the first point is that this budget will finally be passed. It was approved by Cabinet last week already, so the GNU partners also agreed. And I think it was great that we stuck in the budget roughly to the budget deficit target and to the debt to GDP trajectory, peaking this year and still easing off over the next few years. And I think that was crucial, what markets wanted. And I think the path going forward in terms of the reduction in the budget deficit ratio over the next few years, plus a rising primary surplus, that's of course the budget balance excluding interest payments, and then the debt ratio peaking and coming off. So all of that was as markets expected, and as I say, perhaps slightly better than expected, but markets also relieved that finally we do have a budget that will be passed.
What are the key fiscal risks in the current coalition government's budget?
I think by far the key risk remains growth, or the lack of growth, the very weak growth that we've had over the last decade, essentially behind that rising debt ratio that we have seen. So the best way to get the budget under control and to make sure that the debt ratio actually peak and continue to ease off over the next few years is to keep on implementing policies that will drive better economic growth. So for me, growth and thus the policies around getting better growth, those are the key risks.
Well, take us through the growth forecast for 2025 through 2027.
Well, I think that it was expected that Treasury will slightly revise their growth forecast lower. I've done so. Many other economists have revised their forecasts down on the back of these global trade tensions and the fear that that would impact South Africa as well. But I think, fortunately, we still expect better growth than the last 2 years, when we had 0.7 and 0.6% growth, and around 1.4, which is Treasury's forecast. I expect 1.5% growth this year. We've seen significant easing in the structural constraints in the economy, and by that I mean we've got more electricity available, Transnet's export volumes are picking up on their system, so that will certainly help. But then, of course, the cyclical side of the economy, much lower than expected inflation numbers, and with that, lower interest rates. And we should perhaps see more interest rate cuts over the next few MPC meetings. All of that will help in getting better economic growth. Global tensions have certainly eased. I think there's more easing inflation numbers going forward because the rand has strengthened, as you mentioned. Oil price is lower than at the start of the year, so there's perhaps more petrol price cuts coming. Even this petrol levy increase in June will just lower the prospective cut that we expected. So we probably won't see an increase in the petrol price, just a lower cut than otherwise would have been the case.
Well, now on revenue measures, tax hikes have been deferred, collections optimised. Give us a few more details on that.
Yes, absolutely. In order to get to those lower trajectory around the budget deficit and make sure that the debt ratio peak, in the absence of the ability to cut spending quite significantly, there needs to be more tax hikes. So Treasury actually penciled in 20 billion rand of tax hikes next year. In the bigger scheme of things, it's not huge compared to the overall revenue take. But still, there were no details around that. So we don't know what taxes will be targeted to get that 20 billion. But then Treasury clearly said that that might be deferred, or we might not see those tax increases if SARS can actually make up better collection over the next few months into next year. And then SARS have often said there's quite a big tax debt sitting on their books, and if they've got more money to do better investigations and more investigators, then they can actually target and get those debt levels to come down. So in other words, better tax receipts. Treasury actually got some extra money from the minister in terms of building that capacity. In the early 2000s, often we've seen a revenue line in the revenue budgets that highlighted improved tax collection by SARS. And I think we're heading back towards that type of environment where we can see that improvement in tax collection, lowering the risk of tax hikes.
And then shifting slightly to President Cyril Ramaphosa's visit to the United States, how might US President Donald Trump's comments on South Africa impact trade relations?
I think it's positive in the sense that we were given an opportunity to start trade negotiations with the US. Not everybody has done that. President Trump and his administration have said clearly that if by the end of the 90-day hold on those extreme tariffs, nobody has come to them to start negotiations, then those extreme tariffs will be reinstated. So in South Africa's case, at least we were afforded the opportunity to come and speak there. President Ramaphosa is only the fourth after President Zelensky and Prime Ministers Mark Carney of Canada and Keir Starmer of the UK to have been afforded a visit to the Oval Office. So I think nothing is clear-cut, but I think at least negotiations have started, and I think it will continue. I don't think it was quite the train smash that most of us expected. I think it came out a touch better. We all expected an ambush. That was there. I think negotiations will continue, and in the end, we should be expecting some kind of trade deal.
Johann, and lastly, what economic priorities should Ramaphosa push in ongoing talks with the United States now that they have kicked off?
I think it's very difficult because there's the belief in the US administration of certain issues in South Africa around genocide, for instance. I think we should just keep on pushing that we have got something to offer the US economy in terms of precious metals, in terms of rare earth minerals. So there are lots of issues where we can actually be a benefit to the US economy. But clearly, I think the process is an ongoing one. We need the US, they need us, and if we continue in that vein, discussing those mutually beneficial areas, then I think we will get to some deal eventually.
Thank you so much for your insights there. Johann Els, Chief Economist at Old Mutual.